Now, so far in this lecture, we've been concerned with how we gather information and how we use information. We use our prior beliefs, our knowledge, our observations to draw other information. What I want to focus on now is how do we use this information in order to actually make choices. In other words, now I want to focus on decision making, which relates to choosing a specific course of behavioral actions from among many possibilities, and often under conditions of uncertainty. You might remember the example I gave you at the beginning of um, of this uh, of this week. I was saying, how did you pick, what university to attend? There are so many factors that play into it. How did you compare them one another? How did you assign a value to each aspect that you care about to finally reach a decision? Here, think of a simpler example. Imagine you have some money and you want to buy a new cell phone. Um, how do you pick among the many possible cell phones you could buy? Well, chances are you're going to look out for a number of cell phones and look at various features that they have. And it might turn out that you really like cell phone A because the camera is amazing and takes great pictures. But you also like cell phone B because it has great reception, never drops a call. And maybe you also like cell phone C because it allows you to send free text messages every month to your friends, something like that. So let's say that you've settled on these because you value these three things. How do you pick among the three? How do you compare, the value of never dropping calls versus the value of a great camera or the value of being able to send texts for free? How do you compare them and rank them and then decide which one to buy? This is decision making. Starting in the 1800s, this problem was approached from a normative point of view, sort of a prescriptive way that says, how should people decide? And one such approach is known as the expected utility theory. Under this view, people are rational decision makers. And if you just give them the right information, they will generally choose the option or the action that is associated with the greatest expected utility to the person. So the greatest is expected value to the person. Now, you might have heard in the context of decision theory of microeconomics, which is the context from which this theory derives, you might have heard the expression of homo economicus, or the idea that individuals are rational decision makers. Now, what does it mean to be a rational decision maker? Well, under this theory, it really means two broad things. First, it means that if I were to give you a number of options, a number of possible choices, your preferences over these choices would be well specified. Now, by well specified, we mean a number of things. First, we mean that your preferences, your preference set over these choices is complete. So I can take any two alternatives and show them to you, and you must always be able to tell me if you like A better than B better than A, or if you find them equivalent. In other words, it never happens that you see a couple choices and go like, I don't know, I can't tell which one I like best. So first, your preference set has to be complete. Second, your preference set has to be transitive. In other words, take three options. If you like option A better than option B, and option B better than option C, you have to like option A better than option C, right? So your preference set has to be transitive. And should you ever find out that your housemate or your roommate does violate this assumption, you can turn them into a money pump, which means an infinite source of money. Pull up your local trusted economist to get more information on how to do that. Then your preference set also has to be independent, and has to be independent in two different ways. First, if you like option A better than option B, then you must also like option A plus $10 better than option B plus $10, right? So in other words, if you like option A better than option B, you must also like option A plus C better than option B plus C. The second way in which your preferences have to be independent is that if you like option A better than option B, then you always like option A better than option B. And I know this sounds odd to say, but a few slides from now, what I mean by this will become very clear. So for now, bear with me. All right, so point one, in order to be a rational decision maker, you need to have a well-specified preference set. Second, once you have the well-specified preference set, you have to choose so to maximize your expected utility. Now, by utility in this context, we mean the value associated with an outcome. And at first approximation, and we'll discuss this in just a moment, at a first approximation, utility really boils down to the price tag, the monetary value of a given option. Second, the probability, which means you need to have an appreciation for what is the likeliness of a certain outcome to occur. And if you know these two things, you can calculate the expected utility of a certain choice, which simply is the product of the probability that a certain choice will lead to a certain outcome, and the utility or the value associated with that outcome. Now, however, even intuitively, it turns out that it's pretty clear that the value of something might actually not be the same thing as its price tag. Let me give you an example. Say that you are walking and suddenly you find there's $1,000 right there on the floor. What is to you the value of that $1,000? By how much would that $1,000 change your life right now? If you had an extra $1,000, right? How much would that give you? How much would that move the needle in your life? Now that you thought about that, compare it to what is the subjective utility of $1,000 if Bill Gates were walking and suddenly found $1,000 on the floor. Now, maybe for him, $1,000 is not even worth, the effort of bending to pick it up from the floor, right? By how much do you think an extra $1,000 could possibly change the life of Bill Gates? So it's pretty intuitive that the value of something is not just its price tag, but relates sort of there is a subjective component. The value of $1,000 to you, to me, to Bill Gates might be very different. Now, a formal demonstration of the fact that value and monetary value and subjective value are not the same was provided in 1979 in a Nobel Prize winning article by Kahneman and Tversky. Now, they focused on what we now call loss aversion. Let me give you an example. Here are two lotteries. Which one would you rather have? Okay, just imagine I'm offering you right now one of these two things. You just tell me which one would you rather have. Would you either have $100 for sure, or would you rather take a 50-50 bet of either winning $200, 50% chance, or winning nothing, 50% chance? Which one would you rather have? Well, when you ask people, most of the times, people tend to pick the first one. People just like the $100 for sure better than the second bet. See, it just seems like $100 for sure is more valuable than $100 maybe. See, if you think of it, if you look at these two lotteries, their expected value is the same. What's the expected value of the first lottery? $100. What's the expected value of the second lottery? Well, the outcome, $200 times its likeliness, 50%. So $100. So these two lotteries, from a purely expected utility point of view, have exactly the same value. And yet, there's such a strong intuition that people prefer the first one. In other words, as I was saying, we seem to prefer $100 for sure way better than maybe $100. Or in other words, maybe 200, maybe nothing. So when dealing with gains, people seem to be risk averse or loss averse. Let's try another one. Again, I'm going to offer you two lotteries, and you have to pick one. Which one would you like best? And here they are. First, lose $100 for sure. Second one, 50-50 chance of losing $200 or losing nothing. Which one would you rather pick? And so notice that, again, the value of the two, the expected value of the two lotteries is identical. In both cases, you're expected to lose $100. The only difference is that in the first one, in lottery A, you're going to lose it for sure. In the second one, you might lose 200 or you might lose nothing. Again, the expected value in both cases is minus $100. And yet, I'm going to say that you picked B. You probably picked the second one. Most people do. So when in this case, it turns out that losing $100 for sure is actually much worse. People like it less than maybe losing $200 and maybe losing nothing. Or in other words, people like losing $100 for sure less than the expected loss of $100. In other words, when dealing with losses, we seem to be risk inclined. So the value of money depends on your circumstance, but it also depends if we're talking about positive money or negative money. So this clearly shows that just taking value to be a price tag is definitely not is not representative of how people approach the issue of value. And that's why most of the times, rather than just talking about expected utility theory, we tend to talk about subjective utility theory. And it's essentially the exact same hypothesis, but we replace value as a price tag with value as a subjective construct. So, the value associated with an outcome is whatever value you specifically place on a certain thing. And as we're going to see in the rest of this lecture, there are a lot of things that affect how we perceive value. In fact, to anticipate what's going to come next, it will turn out that our cognitive system doesn't work very well with either of the two core tenets of this normative theory. Our preference sets are not that well specified, as I'm going to show you. On top of that, we're also not great at calculating probabilities. So it's pretty hard to argue that, given this, we actually choose by calculating some form of expected or subjective expected utility theory.